What does this fearsome creature have to do with birdwatching? Find out next on Twits and Pishers. Hello, fellow birders, and welcome to Sanibel Island on the Gulf Coast of southwestern Florida. To get to Sanibel Island, I first flew to Fort Myers, Florida, and from there it was a short half-hour drive across the causeway to the island itself. Now, as you know, Florida is a densely populated, extremely highly developed place, extremely popular. But here on Sanibel, they've been quite sensitive to that, and as a result, over half of this island has been set aside for the wildlife, for the birds, and as a result of that, it's a great place for birding. It's a popular spot for Canadian people to visit in the winter, northerners of all sorts actually, and it's also a popular spot for some Canadian birds, but they have some of their own birds here too. The first thing you notice when you get here are all the white, long-legged wading birds. So why don't we go check those out right now, get those out of the way. Most of the white wading birds in Florida are called egrets, although egret is just another name for herons with nice feathers. The snowy egret has yellow feet and a black bill and is a slender, graceful bird that eats fish and other aquatic critters. At low tide, they congregate sometimes in large, noisy flocks with other birds around pools that are filled with fish. And that's the best time to get to know the different species of egrets and herons. During the breeding season, snowy egrets especially develop lovely plumes on their head and back. The snowy egret is a relatively small heron, but this is difficult to judge unless you can compare it with something else like this white ibis. These two birds are about the same size. We'll come back to the ibis later, but for now, notice that it has a down-curved whoopy bill, that's the term I prefer, over D-curved, and a dull off-white color, not the bright snow white of the snowy egret in front of it. Both of them are much smaller than that familiar great blue heron, which is, of course, the largest heron of all, at least in North America. That white bird, just about as big as the great blue, is another species of egret, the great egret. It has a yellow bill and greenish skin in front of the eye. Both species are found just about everywhere in the Ding-Darling National Wildlife Refuge on Sanibel Island, and you should have no trouble finding and comparing them. Have a look at that. These two birds, they're posing just like a picture in a field guide. There we go. Just about perfect. Now how about this one, with a gray and black bill and greenish legs? This is an immature little blue heron, and this particular bird has one of its head feathers out of place, probably the result of trying to eat something that decided to fight back. The bird was so tame, by the way, that at one point it walked out of the underbrush and right across my feet. They seem to do a lot of their hunting out of the water, unlike the other white herons of Sanibel, but reminiscent of their close cousin, the cattle egret, which is a bird you rarely find in these sorts of wet environments. This is the adult little blue heron. It's a lot more easy to recognize than the young one because it's blue. But you know, if you watch these herons and egrets, enough of them for long enough, you get a feel for their proportions, for their behavior, for their overall shape, and then you can recognize them no matter what color they are. This group in the background here, they're looking at an American crocodile. It's the only American crocodile on the west coast of Florida. Usually that's an animal that hangs out down at the tip of the state and in the Keys. You might be wondering why we're interested in a crocodile. After all, this is a bird watching show, but crocodilians are quite closely related to birds. In fact, for a long time, paleontologists thought that the ancestor of all birds was a crocodilian. Well, it turns out it's actually more likely to be a dinosaur. And the dinosaurs, the crocodilians, the extinct pterosaurs, and so on, and the birds all form a group together called the archosaurs. And they share certain characteristics. If you think about it, they all lay eggs in nests. They look after their young. Some crocodilians look after their young for years and years and years. And they all sing during the breeding season too. Bird song, you're familiar with that. Crocodilian song, it's more like, you know, trucks backing up and burps and things like that, but it's still song. And of course, the first birds had teeth too. So, if you're a bird watcher, you might just want to expand your horizons slightly and watch crocodilians as well. This particular crocodile first appeared on nearby Pine Island and was transported by biologists down to the Florida Keys. Not long after, it swam back to Sanibel Island, and it's been a major public attraction there ever since. Every day, interpreters like Linda Patton explain to visitors why a visit from a crocodile is always a special event.
This is a caiman. You know how big we're always concerned about the crocodiles, the dinosaurs? And here we have the ability to keep them from becoming extinct, and yet we're taking them out.
The American alligator is the common crocodilian on Sanibel Island, and it has a much broader snout than the crocodile with a less protuberant dentition. Linda and I were admiring this one when we spotted a very nice bird in the background. Linda, is that a greenback heron there?
You know, I think it is. And what's really interesting about herons, the greenback heron is very elusive and shy and will only be in the mangrove roots.
I love the bright yellow eye on that bird.
Yeah, it's just gorgeous. And the burgundy color and the green.
Bit of iridescence there. Ooh, that's nice. That's nice. You're saying they're very patient hunters too, eh?
Very patient fishing birds.
Do you remember the famous greenback heron that learned to throw food into a fish pond and then wait for the fish to come up? And then he'd nab the... There was all this debate about whether it was a particularly intelligent bird or whether it just happened upon that strategy. I think that was a National Geographic article.
Oh, really?
Yeah, many years ago. I don't think they're all that sneaky. Another interesting species of heron is the reddish egret, a scruffy bird with a reddish head and neck, a two-toned bill, and a grayish back. They usually feed alone in wide open shallow flats, and they are very amusing birds.
Right, yeah, you never seen one of those big. This area is one of the few places you will find the reddish egret. Very interesting bird. Reddish egrets are one of the most interesting herons of all to watch for fishing techniques because of their canopy feeding, which is pretty hysterical. A lot of people can come out here and be very depressed and then watch the reddish egret for a few minutes and get very excited.
Perks them right back.
Perks them right back up.
Yeah, as they form a canopy with the wings. That's why it's called
canopy
canopy
feeding. It's called
feeding,
wing flicking or canopy feeding, and sometimes they'll pull both wings up and then they'll tilt the head a little bit maybe because their eyes are more on the side of their head down. And so they'll kind of run. It looks pretty funny.
It does, yeah. Well, I guess they're trying to just move the fish into...
Yeah, what they're probably doing, we think, is that by raising the wing, it creates a shadow effect, and it actually allows the egret to be able to see better to pull the fish out, or by spreading their wings, they're creating shade to attract the fish.
Right, so the fish say, oh no, an egret, I'll go in the shady place.
That's it.
Well, you know, I've heard it described as dancing and described as drunkenness too, but it's much more coordinated than drunkenness, isn't it?
Yeah. After you learn about what they're doing and that they're not just acting silly for their fun of it.
I find it interesting to compare the fishing and hunting styles of these different species around here.
As a matter of fact, one of my most interesting days was the day that I came out and saw a snowy egret. Just a little regular snowy egret with the yellow spats or yellow feet. But it was doing something, I thought acted like it was blowing bubbles. It was standing very still, and you could see bubbles coming up around the bill. And so I kept watching this bird several days doing this particular technique, and I had no idea what it was about. Went into the refuge and talked to the biologists. They said, well, we've never heard of anything like this.
Maybe just like that little burbling noise.
Maybe we did. We thought it was, and it was the only egret doing this particular type of technique. So eventually, another volunteer saw it. We got a picture of it. We brought it into the refuge manager and said, look, this is what this egret's been doing. And as I researched it, I did read that bill vibrating is one of the techniques that snowy egrets use to attract fish. So they literally sit there and vibrate their bill in the water, and the fish apparently are attracted to this.
No kidding, and that's the technical name.
Bill vibrating.
It's an ornithological fact. Fascinating. Isn't that nice?
Pretty incredible.
Wow.
There are so many fish in these mangrove swamps, it's no wonder the herons are so common. Just after hearing Linda's bill vibrating story, I was amazed to see this TriColored heron demonstrate yet another technique, stabbing at fish while flying low over the water. They're killifish, I think. I looked this phenomenon up and found out that it was called foot dragging, another amazing ornithological fact that you won't find in your field guides. This bird was quite nervous about the local alligator, and there's no doubt that the gator would have eaten the heron given half a chance. Here we go again. Watch carefully. Now let's see that again in slow motion. Stab, drag the feet, fly low over the water. This is a rare behavior and a real treat to see. Doesn't look like he caught any fish that time, but he takes one more stab at it just in case. The TriColored heron has a white trim on the underside of the neck and the body, and it's a beautiful bird. Its evasive flight maneuvers are another nifty aspect of this bird's behavior. Boy, you try following one of these things with your spotting scope.
That's a yellow-crowned night heron back there. It's a bird with a logical name. Actually does have a yellow crown on the head instead of a black crown like the black-crowned night heron, and it's most active at night, or at least in low light periods, early and late in the day. It's a very powerful, stocky heron, and with that big bill it can catch frogs and crabs and other sorts of tasty swamp morsels. It's looking a bit sleepy and groggy right now, just doing a bit of preening. Doesn't seem to mind us. Hey, big surprise around here, the birds here just don't mind people at all. We've been seeing the black-crowned night heron on our other shows. That's mostly a, well, it's not mostly a western bird, but it's the night heron that you see in the west. This is an eastern bird. There are black-crowned night herons too, and they apparently when people see them they get very excited. But for me, that's the good one, the yellow-crowned night heron. Oh, look at that. Oh, magnificent frigatebird. Oh, man, that's behind the trees. Beautiful bird. That bird has the lightest body for the surface area of the wings of any bird, or at least the frigate birds in general do. I hope it comes back. Gorgeous.
Let's take a moment to look at another gorgeous bird that is not in the heron family, the osprey. This huge bird of prey eats only fish, which it catches by grabbing them right out of the water. Well, maybe not that time. It's brown above and white underneath, and this one has a slight dark necklace indicating that it is a mature female. My trip to Sanibel Island took place in January, and many of the ospreys were already nesting by then. Their piercing whistles were the dominant bird sounds I heard in the refuge, and these birds all seemed on edge, since there were so many of them in one place, and since they are fiercely territorial and combative with one another. In fact, they're so territorial that this one was attacking an adult bald eagle.
a fearsome bird much larger than itself, and as you can see, the eagle was taking the matter very seriously. I've often seen the reverse situation where the eagle dives at the osprey until the osprey lets go of the fish that it is carrying, but in this case the osprey was probably trying to drive the eagle out of its territory. It takes a lot to intimidate an osprey, and I've heard from raptor biologists that they will even attack helicopters given half a chance. That one's a vulture. Fooled the cameraman. Now here are some white ibises. I promised we'd get back to them. The ibises, unlike the herons, feed as much by touch as they do by sight, hence the long whoopy bill and the probing style of feeding reminiscent of shorebirds in the sandpiper family. Those are distant but similar relatives. Ibises feed in small flocks in a variety of habitats, often alongside various herons and egrets, like the two TriColored herons feeding in the background here. One of the reasons they are white is so their buddies can find them at a distance, but with so many white birds around, you can't help but wonder how they sort themselves out. Notice the pink bill, the pink legs, and black wingtips only visible every now and again. Once you get used to them, you'll never mistake these birds for a heron or an egret, and I found them very pleasant to watch. They have a sleepy expression in their eye and a mild, very pleasing temperament. They're sort of like little cows.
These little portable dictaphones are a great thing for birding. You know how sometimes you see a bird, you don't know exactly what it is. You want to get as many observations recorded as you can before the bird flies away, but you don't want to be fiddling around with note paper and a pen while you're looking through your binoculars. Well, here's what you do. For example, let's take this white bird over here. Lots of white birds around here. It gets confusing. You have a look at it, turn on your recorder, and that is a white wading bird about the size of a crow with a pink face and a pink bill that curves downward and pink legs and black wingtips. You can just barely see the black wingtips. Then later you just reel it back, play it back to yourself, and figure it out with the field guide.
Remember to pick up some sunscreen, some shampoo.
Well, you get the idea.
Gifts for the folks back home. On the recorder, and that is a white wading bird about the size.
Really good system.
Now what do you think this one is? A big black and white bird with the general proportions of an ibis? Well, it's not an ibis, I'm sorry to say. It's another one of the amazing wading birds of Sanibel Island, the wood stork, the only regularly occurring North American member of the stork family. These birds are also touch feeders, and they enjoy probing quietly around in the swamp, sometimes stirring up the muck with their feet. There he goes, stirring up the muck. I'm not sure what this one is doing with its wing. As the sun sets,
The storks come together to roost for the night in the treetops, sometimes stopping for one last feed along the way. Other species are also coming in to roost, and anyone who visits the refuge to watch birds should definitely stay until the end of the day. Now, what's this bird flying in? It's got a hint of pink to it and an oddly shaped bill. It's a group of roseate spoonbills, and that's one of the most spectacular birds in North America. Here comes another one. You know, the bill isn't really spoon-shaped. It's flat, like a canoe paddle or a squash racket, or a couple of canoe paddles and squash rackets. The young spoonbills are not as colorful as the adults, but at least they have feathers on their heads. They feed by sweeping the bill through the water, looking for small animals including fish, crustaceans, and insects to eat. They are sometimes quarrelsome, and they're members of the Ibis family. Apart from their bills, they look just like ibises from about the neck down. This is the adult. Fantastic colors. And notice the orange tail on this bird as well. Roseate spoonbills are easy to see. They usually hang out in flocks, and they're another great reason to visit Sanibel Island on a bird-watching trip. Our species total is now at 247. That's 47 species past the original goal of 200. So let's set a new goal today. Let's say 250, just to be safe. Doesn't seem to be any birds in this part of the refuge. Well, that's kind of a relief after what we've been through. There are so many birds here. The birding is intense. The birding is very good. And you know, I was thinking maybe it was time to head back up to Canada, see a few snowy owls and those sorts of things. But now my feeling is, no, this is too good. We've got to keep going on this Florida birding adventure. So we'll be back here in Florida again next time. So please join us then. And until then, happy bird watching yourself. Bye for now. And And don't forget to vote for your favorite title from our top 5 choices: Twits and Pishers, which is the current title, Cheap Trills, Flock on the Wild Side, Bird's Eye View, and The Traveling Bird Watcher. You have just one more week to get your vote into the Discovery Channel by fax or mail.